The air smells of iron and smoke and something sweet. Something you don't want to name. You look left, you look right. Men are screaming in languages you don't understand. The sky above you is black with arrows that haven't landed yet. You are surrounded on 3 sides. The river is behind you. There is nowhere to go. And then the trumpets sound, not yours. And the world goes very, very quiet. This is Greece. Ancient, exhausted, bleeding Greece. The year is 86 BC. The Roman Republic is not yet an empire, but it is already something the world has never seen. A war machine wrapped in a senate. A civilization that eats other civilizations and calls it peace. And Greece, the cradle of philosophy, democracy, the very language of thought, is caught in the middle of a war. It didn't start. A war between Rome and a king so ambitious, so theatrical, so ruthlessly brilliant, that he had already made himself into a legend. His name isn't important yet. What matters is what he did, and what Rome sent to stop him. Before this day ends, an army of nearly 120,000 soldiers will be broken, not defeated, not retreated. Broken, scattered into dust and memory. But here's the mystery that historians have argued about for 2,000 years. How does a Roman force outnumbered 4-1, possibly more, not just survive, but win so completely that barely anyone escapes to tell the story? Before the sun sets on this battle, one general will make a decision that defies every rule of ancient warfare. A river will run a color that has nothing to do with the soil, and a name carved into the stone of history will mean something entirely different by morning. Let us begin in the spring. The town of Chaeronea sits in the Greek region of Boeotia, cupped between low hills and the silver bend of the Cephissus River. It is not a grand city. It has no famous harbor, no soaring acropolis. What it has is a plain, wide, flat, and terrible, perfectly shaped for armies to destroy each other on. The Roman general who marches into this landscape in the spring of 86 BC is Lucius Cornelius Sulla. He is 48 years old. He has red hair and pale eyes, and a face that ancient writers described as spotted, patchy with color, flushed with something that looks like fury and might be. He is theatrical, superstitious, and frighteningly calm in battle. He keeps a small golden figurine of Apollo in his tent. He talks to it before every engagement. His army, somewhere between 30,000 and 40,000 men. His enemy, a force that ancient sources place at 110,000 to 120,000, churning sea of soldiers loyal to Arcane, the general of Mithridates VI, king of Pontus, the man who had massacred 80,000 Roman citizens in Asia Minor in a single day. Sulla looks at those numbers. Ekanau stem. He doesn't retreat. Builds. Stop. Think about what that means. He builds in the face of an overwhelming force. Sulla's first act is to pick up a shovel. The Romans construct a defensive earthwork, a raised terrace along the foothills, to prevent Archelaus's cavalry from flanking them on the left. They dig channels. They redirect terrain. They reshape the battlefield itself before a single sword is drawn. Archelaus watches this from across the plain, and he is confused. He thought the Romans would attack. They always attack. He didn't know that Sulla was not a typical Roman. Now meet the man on the other side of the plain. His name is Taxus. He commands the left wing of Archelaus's massive army, and he is riding a horse that cost more than most men earn in a lifetime. He has served He has seen armies fall before him like grass. He has, in his chest, the absolute certainty of a man who has never truly lost. He looks at the Roman lines, thin, compact, disciplined, and he does a simple calculation. For every Roman soldier, his army has 4, maybe more. He smiles. He has reason to. But there is a man in the Roman lines who Taxus has not studied carefully enough. A man named Murena. Lucius Licinius Murena. Commanding the Roman left, positioned directly across from Taxiles's overwhelming wing. Murena is not smiling. Murena is counting steps to the river behind him. He is doing a different kind of calculation. The kind men do when they accept they might die, but intend to make that death cost something. Within the hour, Murena will be the most important man on the battlefield, and Taxus will understand Too late, exactly what he missed. Here is what military history teaches us about outnumbered armies. They run, or they form a defensive square, or they negotiate. They do not, generally speaking, hold the line for hours against a force 4 times their size, while their general methodically executes a trap that requires everything to go right simultaneously. But Sulla had understood something about Archelaus's massive army that Archelaus had not fully understood about himself. Size is a weapon. It is also a liability. 120,000 men require coordination. They require communication. They require every wing, every contingent, every unit of cavalry to move in sync, like fingers on a hand. And if one finger bends the wrong way at the wrong moment, ... the hand breaks. Sulla's plan was not to fight the army. It was to break the hand, the cruelty of this moment. The historical injustice buried in it is that Archelaus was not a fool. He was, by most accounts, one of the most gifted commanders in the Pontic army. His tactics were sophisticated. His troop positioning was textbook. He had scythed chariots, devastating, wheel-bladed machines of war designed to carve through infantry formations like sickles through wheat. He used them. He launched them. And the Romans stepped aside. Not in chaos, in silence. In pre-planned, rehearsed, cold-blooded silence. The Romans had trained for this. They opened their lines, gaps just wide enough, and let the chariots thunder through harmlessly, like water through open fingers. The chariots crashed into nothing. Archelaus's most feared weapon became a spectacle. He had the better army. He had the superior numbers. He had prepared, and it didn't matter. The battle has now been raging for 3 hours. The sun is high and merciless over the Boeotian plain. The dust is so thick that men on the Roman right cannot see the men on the Roman left. Only shapes, silhouettes, shadows moving through amber haze. Murena's left wing is in trouble. Taxiles has pressed forward with his massive numerical advantage, and the Roman lines on that side are bending, dangerously, visibly bending, like a bow pulled too far. Soldiers are dying in numbers that would break most armies. The Cepheus' river glistens behind them. A silver trap. Sulla rides to the left. Himself. He does something remarkable. He dismounts his horse. He takes a Roman standard, a golden eagle on a pole, the sacred symbol of a legion, and he walks forward, toward the enemy, alone. He turns to his men and says, "For me, Romans, it is honorable to die here. But where will you say you abandoned your general?" The soldiers stop retreating. They turn around. Sulla has gambled his life on the psychology of shame and won. The line holds. But the battle's true turning point hadn't happened yet. That was still coming, and when it came, it would not look like victory. It would look like catastrophe. The scythed chariots have failed. The left wing has held. The battle has ground into a brutal, grinding, hour-long war of attrition. And then Archelaus makes his move. He sees a gap, a real gap. On the Roman right, where the terrain shifts near the foothills, a section of the Roman line has thinned. Perhaps exhaustion, perhaps a unit pushed too far forward. Whatever the reason, Archelaus sees it, and he sends his cavalry thundering toward it. It is the right decision. It is, strategically, the correct thing to do. And Sulla has been waiting for it, hidden in the foothills, concealed behind the earthworks. The Romans built in those first days of shovel work and strategic patience are Roman cohorts, fresh, rested, silent. They emerge from the high ground at a dead run. What happens next is fast, brutally, terrifyingly fast. The Pontic cavalry, moving at full speed toward a gap that no longer exists, collides with Roman infantry pouring down from the hills. The shock is total. The cavalry cannot turn, cannot slow, cannot form. They are caught between the hammer of the emerging cohorts and the anvil of the Roman main line. Archelaus's right wing doesn't bend. It shatters, and when a wing shatters on a battlefield of 120,000 men, the panic doesn't stay in one place. It travels. It travels. Taxel's still pressing forward on the other flank. Hears the screaming behind him before he understands its source. He turns. He sees men running. His men not away from the Romans in front of them, but away from something to the rear, away from the direction the battle was supposed to be going. The realization takes seconds. The consequences take minutes. His men break too. Not all at once. First, in clusters. Unit R. A contingent there, men dropping their shields and running toward the river, because the river is the only direction that doesn't have Romans in it. The Cephasus receives them. Ancient sources say it grimly. Plainly, the river ran red, not as metaphor, as fact. Some men drowned in armor too heavy to swim in. Some were cut down on the bank. Some simply disappeared into the current, carried away, unnamed, uncounted, thousands of them. Plutarch, writing over a century later, records that Sulla counted the dead and found the numbers almost impossible to believe. Of an army that had begun the day with more than 100,000 soldiers, his estimate says fewer than 10,000 escaped. One moment, one turning of the tide, one trap sprung at exactly the right second, and an army ceased to exist. Somewhere on that battlefield, in the choking dust and the roar of dying men, there was a soldier, unnamed, unrecorded, who had woken up that morning convinced he was going to live. He had eaten something. He had thought of someone. He had believed, as soldiers must believe to function, that the mathematics of his side were in his favor. 4-1. How could they lose? He was wrong, and we will never know his name. That is what war actually is, beneath the tactics and the trumpets. Archelaus escapes. Barely. He reaches the coast with a remnant of his force and retreats to the island of He will fight again, a second battle, at Archomenos, just weeks later, where Sulla will repeat his achievement with almost contemptuous efficiency. But the first battle, Chaeronea, changes everything. It ends Mithridates' dream of a Greek empire. It shatters the illusion that Pontic numbers could overwhelm Roman discipline. It sends a message from the Aegean to the Caucasus. Rome does not care how many soldiers you have. Rome cares about where you put them. Sulla returns to Rome, not as a general. As a force of nature, the Senate feared him. His enemies feared him more. The victory at Chaeronea, against those odds, with those numbers, becomes the cornerstone of a reputation so terrifying that when Sulla eventually marches on Rome itself, his own city opens its gates. Nobody wants to be the army on the plain. A diary. Not exactly, but close. Plutarch's Life of Sulla draws on sources that no longer exist. Eyewitness accounts, official Roman records, and most strikingly Sulla's own memoirs. Sulla wrote his memoirs. 22 volumes. He was still writing them the day he died. In those memoirs, according to Plutarch, Sulla described the moment he walked forward with the standard. He described the faces of his soldiers. He described the choice, fully conscious, fully calculated, to make himself the most visible man on the battlefield, betting everything on the Roman soldier's inability to watch his general die without responding. He wasn't being brave, he was being a psychologist. He knew exactly what he was doing. Untat detail. That cold, brilliant, manipulative detail reframes everything we think we know about Kat. It wasn't just a military victory. It was a performance, staged, directed, executed by a man who understood that war is not won in the field, it is won in the mind. The plain of Chaeronea is quiet now. It has been quiet for 2,000 years. Mostly, sheep graze there. Tourists sometimes walk it, squinting at the horizon, trying to feel something. In the town, there is a stone lion, massive, ancient, and weathered to smoothness. It marks a grave. Scholars debate exactly whose grave, exactly which battle it commemorates. Some say it remembers a different fight, centuries earlier, when Philip of Macedon crushed the sacred band of Thebes on this same flat ground. Chaeronea keeps collecting its dead. The soldiers who drowned in the Cephasus were never properly buried. Their armor settled into the riverbed. Their bones dispersed. They became part of the geography, the soil of a place that had swallowed armies before and would swallow them again. They remembered the fear that morning. They remembered the sound of the chariots that changed nothing. They remembered the moment the ground stopped shaking in the right direction, and they remembered those few who survived that numbers had meant nothing in the end. The law that Kyrenia wrote into the stone of Roman military doctrine was simple. Terrain, timing, and psychological dominance will always defeat mass. Always. Every Roman general after Sulla studied Kyrenia. Every military academy in the modern world still does. But there's one more thing. Go back to that moment. The ground shaking, the air tasting of iron. The arrows not yet landed, the river behind you, and nowhere to go. Now you know what that was. You were standing inside the last seconds of an army that had every reason to win and lost to something numbers cannot measure. Sulla's golden Apollo watched the whole thing from a tent somewhere in the foothills. Whether it helped is a question for the religious. What it did, certainly, was give one ruthless, brilliant, flame-haired general the absolute confidence that he could not lose. And confidence, on a battlefield, is its own kind of weapon. Kyrenia still sits in Boeotia. The river still bends at the edge of town, and somewhere beneath the silt and the centuries, the armor is still there, waiting for someone to ask, what really happened here? The ends where is something that shouldn't have been possible, and somehow that makes it the most Roman story ever told.